The question I'm asking today is, why do we men define ourselves so much by what we achieve that enough is never enough? In other words, a guy can be crazy rich and still want more, or still feel the need to prove himself. Or you might get a guy who's not quite as rich as that, but who hasn't quite achieved what he himself set out to do, and so believes that he's a failure because of that. And this is not just about older men. I see many young men already on the path to one of those outcomes. I'm Neil Beerbaum, and I provide a growth map for men, helping you to grow stronger and live deeper by standing on the 3 pillars of mindset, accountability, and purpose. In this video, I'll show you why professional achievement is so important for men and why it's important for a man to find a deeper answer to the question of success than just a monetary value or a level of professional achievement. I'll also show you how to find that answer in your own life without losing any of that ambition that drives you. So let's get into it. Here's a story. I was once called in to see if I could help the brother of a client. I found this guy in his early 60s in a chair in his living room, almost catatonic. He was rocking back and forth going, "I shouldn't have done it, I shouldn't have done it." He was referring to the fact that he had emigrated, as many people have done, from South Africa to Australia. And in doing that, he gave up his share in a big insurance company that he had built back home and tried to build the same scale of business in Australia, which he did not succeed at. And he had returned home, not just with his tail between his legs, but in this catatonic state. Now, the irony is he was still worth something in probably the tens of millions of rands, but it wasn't in the hundreds of millions or maybe billions that he had hoped for. And not just hoped for, and that's where this becomes relevant. It was clear to me that his whole identity had become linked to the idea of achieving an exit in the hundreds of millions or billions, whatever that was. And having failed at that, he was not satisfied to say, "Oh, well, at least I tried," and be okay with having enough to live comfortably on for the rest of his life without working. So let's have a look at what's going on here. That number that he had in his mind was not an objective number, was it? I mean, it wasn't necessary for him to achieve that number to be comfortable in retirement. After all, as one very wealthy friend of mine once said, you can only sit on one golden toilet seat at a time. So it wasn't a comfort number, it certainly wasn't a survival number, and it wasn't needed for him to count himself worthy as a human being, a father, a husband, or anything else. So it was an imaginary number, one that he made up, and then he hooked his whole identity, his whole sense of self onto it. Can you see what a fragile construct that is? Now, he might be an extreme case, but he illustrates something that most men do, which is to hook their whole identity, and therefore their sense of self-worth, onto a number. And it might not be literally a number, it can also be about status or recognition. Here's another story about a small-town doctor. He was a big shot in his small town because he was the doctor. Everyone looked up to him and called him doctor. And then he made what was really an emotional decision to move to another small town in another state to be close to his children and grandchildren. But nobody knew him there, and he didn't have the same social status. He went into a depression and had to get treatment, which was another come down for him. And part of his recovery was to ultimately move back to his original town. But again, there was now a new doctor. People had moved on. Although he had a great track record of helping people and he was a great father and friend, none of that was enough to sustain him in terms of his sense of self as he went into retirement. He had pegged his entire sense of worth onto his professional status. So here's my first point. Most men do that. They peg their entire identity on what they earn, what they own, or on their professional or social status. And most often it's not anybody else forcing that on us. It's something we create for ourselves. And then we have the story that we're doing it for our family. But I promise you, your children are not going to sleep at night thinking, "My dad better make that 7-figure exit or I'm not going to love him anymore." And they're also not going to stand at your grave and say, "I wish my dad had made more money." You're doing it to yourself. And it's not just older men. Younger men do it too. I can think of 2 examples of young men I've coached who I could see were already headed in the same direction. One young man believed he needed 100 million in assets before he could ask a woman to marry him. I know some of you guys will nod and say, yes, 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 but, that's not essential. And another was insistent that he had to influence 1 billion lives. That was his phrase. I don't mean to shame these guys, but I'm sure you'll agree that those are not essential paths. And you can see that they headed down the same road as those 2 older men that we heard about earlier. So why do men do that? Well, one person who's done a lot of work in this area is the neurobiologist Michael Gurian. And he did brain-based studies that showed that there's a biological tendency in men to seek self-worth through personal independent performance. Whereas in women, he said, there's a greater tendency to experience worth through relationships and intimacy. Now, I always get into trouble with the woke folk when I offer this argument, so I'll be clear that Gurian acknowledges that some of this may be socialized, but he emphasizes that its origins lie in human biology. And the biological link goes like this. A woman is able to gestate a new life within her body for 9 months. This whole new person literally grows as part of her. That's a profound experience and a profound level of connection to life that men can never have, nor even begin to understand. All a man can do is donate his sperm. After that, it all happens at arm's length. Until recently, we weren't even there for the birth. And to top it all, in the first year or so, the child continues to draw food from the mother's body. And what could a man do, historically, to feel wanted, useful, and like he has a purpose after he has delivered his sperm? Well, he could go and hunt and provide, right? And indeed, that's how it is for us men. We have to look outward to find that connection to life and to feel useful, like we have a purpose. And the expression of that in our modern era is that achievement matters to men in a different way than it matters to women. For women, it's a part of who they are. For men, very often, it is who they are. Various studies have shown that mortality rates for men spike in the range of 2 to 5 years after retiring. And one explanation could be that they've pegged their entire identity on that fragile mental construct of what constitutes meaningful achievement, and when that's not there, they lose their sense of self, their sense of self-worth, and have nothing left to live for. So let's pause for a moment and hold the word worth out in front of you. Ask yourself, using exactly these words, what is my worth? What comes up? Is it a number? Is that number of monetary value? Is it based on what you earn, what you own, or what social or professional status you've achieved? And if your answer to any of those is a yes, well, that's natural for you as a man if we go with what Michael Gurian said. It becomes a problem if that number or status is the only hook you have to hang your worth onto. If it is, you're at risk of crashing if you don't achieve that exact thing, or having a very short retirement before you kick the bucket. You're also at risk of being a pain in the ass for everyone around you while you're on your way to that number, because men who are obsessed with achieving a number tend to be rather one-sided in their approach to life. Or maybe one other category would be you haven't achieved that number or status, and you're questioning whether you're a failure in life. So let's look at each of those in turn. The first is crashing if you don't achieve, a bit like our guy in the first example. Or maybe not even as extreme as that, but it's still a fragile foundation that you've created for yourself. Because achieving that number is not guaranteed, so you need to be prepared for that. And what some men do when they don't achieve their number, if their whole identity depends on it, is they become desperate. And that's when they turn to nefarious activities, commit white-collar crimes, become swindlers, start Ponzi schemes, take big risks, and so on. So you're kind of putting yourself and your family in danger if your whole identity is hooked on a number to that degree. The second risk is having an early exit within a few years after you retire because you used up all your life force by chasing that number or because you have nothing left to live for. So you crash in a different way. Maybe you're okay with that. I know a lot of men who wouldn't be, who would want to enjoy a longer retirement. Then there are those men who become a pain in the ass because they're so obsessed. They tend to focus too much on work and neglect other areas of their life, especially their wife and family. Or they make every decision through the lens of whether it will help them achieve their goal or not. Shall we accept this dinner invitation? Well, is anyone useful to my goal going to be there? Or they turn everything into a competition. If they take up cycling, for example, they'll have to have the best bike, ride the furthest, and so on. They'll also be very likely to expect the same thing of everyone else and judge those who don't achieve it or don't strive for that same goal. They might put enormous pressure on their children to achieve exactly the same thing, whether it's right for them or not. And they'll have unrealistic standards for the people who work for them or report to them. Basically, they'll be most unpleasant to live with and work for, but they won't register that fact because nothing else matters to them. And so if you're one of those guys watching this video, chances are it's because somebody sent you here. And I hope you're listening. Then finally, and this one is important, There are those men and many men who just haven't achieved what they feel they should have. And I have this to say to them. You're probably wrong. You have probably held something else as a higher priority, which you've given more time, energy, and attention to. And if you're honest, you have achieved something in that area. You're just not treating it as relevant. You're looking at the things society values most, money and status, and you're measuring yourself against that, against men who've achieved on those factors. But it's like you trained your whole life for the high jump, and then you feel depressed because you didn't win the long jump. Here are some examples of what I mean. Let's say you prioritized ethics instead of money. And so there were various decision points in your life where you decided not to pursue a certain path to make money because of ethics, or because of family, or because you wanted to pursue creative pursuits or something more meaningful. Sometimes men can pursue those things and succeed financially, but very often they don't. Usually the two don't go together. And so you get what you prioritize, and not always all of the other stuff. Not always the money or the status. I'll bet that if you took an honest look at your life, you'd find that there was something that you valued and prioritized more than money, and you made your choices that leaned toward that. Today, you're rich in that area, richer than most men you know. And you don't have as much money as you'd hoped. That's all. So your job is to place a value, an honest value, on the things that you have valued and prioritized, and stop comparing yourself to other men who have valued a number. And as for not having achieved that number, add the word yet to the end of that sentence, because you still can. Knowing what you know now, you can make a choice to reprioritize for a while, if you must. Although you might not. You might rather want to come to terms with what matters to you and the choices you've made as a result of that, and accept that life has delivered exactly that, and make your peace with it. So in general then, for all the above categories of men, you want to cast your net wider and see what else you can base your sense of self and your worth on. And you can start by asking yourself this question: what worth do I have, apart from what I do, or what I earn, or what I own? And here are some areas where you can look for and develop self-worth. There's your relationship, your worth as a partner; parent, your worth as a parental mentor; friendship, your worth as a friend; civic duty, your worth as a citizen. Or what about your worth as a role model to young people, or charity, helping others, or ethics, or spirituality, spiritual values, and so on? And of course, it would be important, having realized this, not to set yourself a target for these and start competing to be the best partner or the best parent. I often hear that. I want to be the best dad. Then you'd be back where you started. Just measure yourself by what you already do. Look for the value that you already create in those areas of your life and the worth that you can draw from it. And of course, strive to do each one a little better, but don't make it one big thing that you now have to hook your worth onto. Make it one of many things. Do this and you'll build a stable, realistic foundation for your sense of self, one that can't be rocked by business failures, retirement, or things not going to plan. You'll find that you open up other possibilities. For example, you'll feel less pressure because you're no longer chasing so hard. You'll have more harmonious relationships because you'll put less pressure on others and be less of a pain in the ass. And you'll open yourself up to a richer, more meaningful life because you'll start to see and accept and align with what really matters to you. So instead of asking, how can I be the best husband or father, simply ask yourself that more balanced question: what worth do I have, apart from what I achieve? And as for that financial number or professional status, chase it as hard as you can. Even let it be the most important thing, just don't make it the only important thing. And who knows, being more balanced, less obsessed, might actually make you more likely to achieve it. So if you're just starting out with me, I'm Neil Bierbaum, and I provide a growth map for men, helping you to grow stronger and live deeper by standing on the 3 pillars of mindset, accountability, and purpose. Subscribe if you want more practical tools to strengthen your mindset, build a congruent sense of self, and live with purpose. And to explore modern masculinity through mindfulness, psychology, and coaching, and not through cliches or opinions or reactive emotion. And maybe you know someone you could share this with. Check out some of my other videos and let me know in the comments what area of growth you're facing a challenge with right now that you'd like me to address. And remember, you're not just a man, you're a man growing stronger and living deeper.